Welcome, everybody. Good morning. My name is Sarah Kleeman. I'm the director of the Olson Memorial Library. I really want to thank you all for joining us today, especially giving us this chance to be together, even though we're apart. I'm really happy to be able to welcome Debbie Ketchum Jircik of Circle of Life Studio to share her talent and expertise with us today in the demonstration she'll be doing of botanical contact printing and talking a little bit about natural dyes. Debbie is joining us today as part of her work with the Wisconsin Regional Art Project or program?
Program.
Oh, yeah. RAP. So RAP is a statewide program that allows regional opportunities for non-professional student and emerging artists to create and exhibit their work. This year, our regional RAP art show, which usually happens in person at the library, has been hosted online. And that has been through a partnership between Debbie, the library, the Headwaters Art League, and the statewide RAP office, which is led by Angela Johnson, who is the RAP director. We're really lucky to also be able to welcome Angela today. She's going to give us a little bit of extra information about the RAP program and some ongoing offerings through that program that'll be coming up very shortly. So I am going to hand things over to Angela to give us a little bit more information about that.
Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Looks like you were able to get onto Blue Jeans app relatively easy. I think this is a new format for all of us. I want to say a huge thank you to both Sandy and Barb for coordinating Eagle River RAP this year, which very unusual year for all of us. Also, a huge thank you to both Sarah and to Debbie. We're really excited to see your work and also your studio behind you. So thank you very much for being here. I'm really looking forward to hearing your work. And thank you for all of the artists for participating and trying something new. I know it can be a bit of a challenge to have to photograph your artwork and do things in a different way. One silver lining to this is I'm seeing some artists who are from the Madison area who maybe would not have participated in Eagle River RAP had it not been online. So I do think a silver lining here is this allows us to connect in a way that we didn't before. I'm going to share just a little bit of info on the State Day Conference. Instead of being one day or 2 days, as it's been in the past, this year it's going to be 3 days online. Karen Ann Hoffman is our State Day speaker. She does raised Iroquois beadwork and just won a National Education NEA Large Folk Art Tradition Award. And she's going to do both storytelling, some interactive demonstration. I'm not sure what that part is yet. Stay tuned. She's working on it. And we'll show some of her raised Iroquois beadwork. In addition, we also have 8 other demonstrations you can sign up for and participate in, from creative art journaling to Helen Klebesaddle's doing a watercolor demonstration. We have a panelist of curators from around the state who are going to talk. And just a quick note on price points. The keynote is $20. Historically, that's what it's always been. The demos are all $10. If you sign up for everything, you get a $20 discount. And much like today, it's being recorded, so it's happening live, but then you'll get the recording so you can go back and start, stop, follow along at your leisure. Another tiny plug for that too is something like this might be great for art teachers or families too who are going to be spending more time at home to start, stop, and make these activities that folks could do. And one quick plug, because we are in my studio, I'm going to be doing a box making demonstration. And here's an example of a box demo that it opens up. And I have an image transfer that I did in here. And now, if you are not a 3D artist, why should you care about making a box? It's something that can be scaled up, scaled down. If you're a bookmaker, you could put books inside it, gift it to a writer. If you're a painter, you could marbleize or paint your own paper. If you're a photographer, it could be a portfolio. It's going to be a demonstration because it feels like it could be too confusing to have potentially 20 people following along and not quite seeing where that corner is. So it'll be a step-by-step demo. So again, shameless plug because we are in my studio. I can open it up briefly for a moment if you have questions specifically about the conference before we move it back to Sarah. And I'll also, because we live in a world where we don't know what tomorrow's going to look like, you may or may not have seen on our website that for the foreseeable future, all regional wraps are going to be online. Again, silver lining is you can participate in many more because each judge will give you different feedback on your artwork. So with that, I'll stop and pause if there's any questions. If there's no questions, we'll bounce it back to Sarah. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Yay.
Awkward pause. Sarah?
That's the name of the game these days. I do want to give one of our local coordinators through the Headwaters Art League a chance to say a few words. We've got Barb Nearing with us this morning. So Barb, do you want to say a few words?
I would be happy to. Mostly, I would just love to thank all of the participants and Debbie and Sarah at the library and Angela and all the people at the Rats for putting up with Sandy and myself as nouveau computer users and participants in an online forum. We have learned so much, and it's been so much fun working with all of you. So with that, I will just say welcome to everyone. Headwaters Art League is a loosely organized but fun group of artists that just get together and share whatever knowledge we have. We meet several times a year, actually weekly, before all the virus stuff started, at the Lola Center in Land O'Lakes, and anyone is welcome to join us. We have a lot of fun, and it's been a lot of fun learning all about how to put our art online. And I agree, there is a silver lining because we are reaching a whole group of people that we probably wouldn't have had the chance to meet before. So thank you all. Thank you, everybody.
Great. Thanks, Barb. I just want to do a few more kind of housekeeping comments, and then I promise we're going to get to the good stuff. As I mentioned, it helps to move things along if I mute everyone other than our presenter during her demonstration. But if you have questions, there is a little chat function. There's something that looks like a little speech bubble. So if you have questions while Debbie is giving her demonstration, feel free to put those in the chat feature. If there's anything pressing, I can chime in and kind of interrupt her. We will have time for an actual conversation at the end, and at that time I'll unmute folks so that we can have like a more organic conversation. I also just want to let you know that Debbie has very graciously prepared a really extensive handout with some additional resources. So I am going to be posting the link to that in the chat as well. If you find that you're having a difficult time accessing that or have any questions after the fact, after the program is over, please feel free to reach out to the library. I will get you either the information you need or I'll get you the contact information of the person who has the information you need so we can kind of continue the fun going forward. Okay, that's all that. We're going to hand things over to Debbie to take this demonstration away.
Well, I hope everybody can see me. Good morning, and thank you all for being here. I'm trying to look at myself through the postage stamp to tell if you can see what I'm going to try to present. So if there's an issue, please throw something in the comments section, and then Sarah can prompt me to move materials so you'll be more able to see what I'm going to go through this morning. A little background about myself. I worked in ceramics from the 70s until 2011, but started in the late 80s getting into hand paper making. And I segued kind of doing two kind of messy, very tactile, process-oriented media. I chose to kind of switch my focus. I've always done kind of a combination of collage, assemblage work. My teacher, Marilyn Sword, who's an amazing, she has since passed, was also a photographer. And so as Angela was talking about her doing some photo processes, in the 90s, I did some work with doing photo processes with my handmade paper, and have always treated handmade paper almost more as a textile assemblage collage medium than book arts, though I have done books. I'm not fastidious enough, and I look forward to learning to make a box for some of my stash of things. But today we're going to talk about something near and dear to my heart. I do a lot of education in community and have done collaboration around connecting with the natural world through art. And I'm very interested in sharing with you today some very simple ways to perhaps do some of these things on your own. We're going to do some experiments showing even on a clay surface, a bisque clay surface, how you might do some botanical printing. It's also been called eco printing. Eco dyeing has been used as a term. The person who really originated this, who I want to credit, who I've also taken an online class with, is India Flint. India Flint is an Australian artist. You'll find her on the resource sheet. She is now teaching online things since things have shifted, even before it was getting harder to travel with visas, etc., for international artists. But she lives in Australia, so she's got a whole different bioregion than we do. But this book, she was doing clothing before then, and I was so intrigued, more because I was looking into ways to have a more environmentally sound art practice. And you know, clay has its drawbacks. Every medium has its drawback. But what I've always loved plants, and I love that they surround us and they give us so much. They're like our allies in so many different ways. But you figured out through her background's Latvian, part of her heritage, and you might have seen the Latvian Easter eggs. And this book was put out about 2007 or 8 when it first came out in Australia. And I bought it pretty quickly thereafter because I had heard of her. But where I was going with that is she realized that like the surface of an egg would take on these prints from the various compounds inside a leaf, just like if we do onion skin dyeing or many other dyes. But you know, with the Latvian Easter eggs, you actually could catch a print. And so she developed that. She was really the pioneer. Now, years later, this has become so popular that there's so many tutorials out there. There's so much online information. I've dabbled a lot, but I also want to credit people that I've taken classes from, and I'm by no means am I an expert. I think of myself as a student of natural dyes and eco printing or the botanical contact printing. We're going to talk about 3, we're going to call them substrates today. Paper, and I know a lot of you that worked in had it, you know, work juried into or submitted work rather to the RAP show are painters or do drawing. So there's some real compatibility there with how you might incorporate something like that into your practice. Also, textile artists. What we're going to work with today is there's 2 major categorizations as far as substrate of textiles. we have animal protein fibers, and we have cellulose. Well, cellulose, unless you work on canvas for your drawing and painting, cellulose is going to be any of your cotton rag papers, any of the kind of papers you might work with, or cotton clothing, cotton fabric, linen, hemp. There's a multitude of cellulose fibers out there. With animal protein fibers, we're primarily looking at silk and wool. I don't work with wool. I'm not a knitter. I'm a knitter wannabe occasionally in the middle of winter when my hands want to keep busy, but that's not my wheelhouse. However, what I'm teaching you today could be translated to wool. We're going to work with animal protein fibers, with cellulose in the form of paper. And for anyone that's in here today that works with clay or has worked with clay, is interested in pursuing it, a bisque surface of clay will take these prints. Now that means it can't be put in a kiln afterwards. It's like if you painted your pottery and you needed to put a finish on it afterwards. So those are the three substrates we'll talk about today. Why we like to start out with, and why I like to teach with silk, and this comes quite a bit from India Flint's work. She has very much, like, natural dyeing doesn't necessarily mean non-toxic. The history of natural dye, there's always been heavy metals involved that help to retain the color. And in my handout, I talk a little bit about how mordant, they're called mordants, and in French, mord means to bite. So it's what allows on textile the dye to stay, that we don't just put it in a teacup and it washes out. The really interesting aspect of animal protein fibers is that they will retain without the use of mordant. You may use mordants, but I don't typically use mordants. Mordants do help to hold onto the color. However, I will tell you from my experiences that it isn't absolutely necessary to use them on textiles in silk, for example. Sometimes it brightens the colors. People feel it's more light fast. I have made scarves from years ago. It's not something like any dye, including synthetic dyes, will fade over time. And so it's important to remember that. But you know, the way you treat a handmade product is going to be different too. You're not going to be hanging it probably in a window. But just to give you a simple introduction today, we're going to really keep our conversation about mordants to very limited, easily accessible things. So that's the first thing we're going to do is silk. Then I'm going to talk about paper. So to reiterate, your easiest fiber to start out with any kind of eco-printing and natural dyeing is going to be silk. You can do wool felt. Sourcing materials I'll talk about. I work a lot on blanks, silk blanks. And it's questionable how ecological that is, because there's a footprint of travel involved with that. And I don't always reconcile all the aspects of my creative practice around this. I wanted to say, though, that my preference is to upcycle. And so it was very easy, 7 years ago to find old silk blouses, silk clothing. You might have something in your closet even that you can use. But it's harder to access. You'll find so much more if you go to a secondhand store or a garage sale. You're going to find more synthetic polyester. It's harder to come by those, late 80s, 90s sleeved, the ones with the padded shoulders. The very common silk blouses, which is what I was using, something that would normally be cast off. So I do a combination of silk fabrics and the silk blanks, and I have a whole resource list that I won't get into. I do want to show you some samples before I show you actual technique. And I'm hoping you'll be able to see this. I'm, again, working with trying to figure out how to get this in your view. Can you see anything?
Yes,
I can't. Okay. So,
absolutely.
Okay. What I want to point out first, I think I'll take this to the side, is if you can see right here some examples of some silk that I did. The most economical way to start is to buy silk blanks of scarf size, and when I teach, we usually do scarves. But these are samples of a couple different types of silk. I usually use Habotai, which is Habotai, but you can see the type of prints you get. They're very earthy. The striped lines in here are because it's wrapped around a dowel or a stick. Now, I tend to have a lot of negative space in my prints, but you could certainly, people will pile it on thick, and you might get more depth that way in your designs. And again, these are just samples. They're not my completed work for anybody in the Northwoods. I don't have eco printed work on my website, but if you go to Artistry, which is associated with the Land O'Lakes Art Center, some of my work with eco printing, botanical contact printing is there. I'm going to tell you that the orangish color you see here, can you see that, Sarah?
Yes, I can. I can.
Okay. All right. So I'm hoping people can see that. That's an example of a eucalyptus leaf. And those came from a time where I got them at the local florist. You know, when around Christmas time, they have bunches of eucalyptus. That, of course, there are some people that will grow annual eucalyptus, and so you could have access that way. Pretty much, I would say 80% of the eco-color book is eucalyptus, because in Australia, it's just everywhere. And of course, in our bioregion, we don't have access to it, but it gives you an example of how some plants really shine, and you can note that there are some color difference. This is a plant that we can grow around here, and I'm going to pull it out here and just lift this up. This is smoke bush, and this is something that you can grow as a shrub up here. It's absolutely beautiful. I didn't think it would grow in our zone, climate zone, but I have two in my yard, which of course I grew to do printing. It makes a beautiful print. And one of the things I like to work with that's local also, and I'm not keeping any secrets, I've got my tried and true on the list I'm sending you. I like to use, even though sumac berries are used medicinally and for teas, I like to gather some sumac berries, which gives a lovely texture on silk or paper. I'm a gardener, so I do use some flowers, but actually I'm much more inclined to use leaves. But like for this time of year, like this can be a dye plant to actually make a vat of dye. But this makes a beautiful print on paper. I don't use it so much on silk. Some things will fade for you, and this tends to. But because paper is so soft, you get almost an embossing effect, like printing does, like if you were to print emboss. So that can add a beautiful element of depth to your work.
And Debbie, what was that last flower called?
That's Coreopsis.
Okay.
Tick seed. The tick seed perennial Coreopsis is beautiful, and I think a lot of people up here grow it. So that's something that's readily available that can be used as a plant to print with. Here's something else very common, a discarded item in many places. You can go to the grocery store and ask to help clean out the onion bin. You could actually take onion skins and sprinkle them on your textile or on your paper and make prints with that. You can either soak them or use them dry. And I'm going to give you a sample of some handmade paper that has, see all those prints on there? That's a combination of leaves, onion skin, and then the little dots are the sumac. So this paper did not have a mordant. This is strictly the handmade paper, and it was steamed. So I have tons of samples, but I want to get down to, first I want to go through all the plants, and then I'll do a demonstration. Because often it's like, why don't I get a print? And sometimes you will, and sometimes you won't. I guess I love experimentation. I don't necessarily have to repeat everything, but take notes. If this is important to you, take notes, do samples. This is a mountain ash leaf. Mountain ash makes a beautiful print. You can use, this is a type of Heliopsis that I have growing in my garden. If anybody wants any, come on down to my place in Eagle River and we'll get you some seeds from the seed, because it reseeds itself. But you can see it has this beautiful red stem. These leaves make a beautiful yellow print. So the other thing I want to bring up is there's a certain element of seasonality with printing. I will dry and press leaves, for example, between blotters in the fall, so that over the winter I can use leaves, and then I'll rehydrate them. I know some people will just put them in a bag, but I like them to be somewhat flat. And the reason we want flat is because we're trying to make as much contact with the surface, whatever the substrate is, as possible. Another plant, I talked about the smoke bush, and it makes a beautiful print. As far as another foraged plant I recommend is something that goes with sumac leaves. Sumac leaves are very rich in tannin. In fact, when we talk about mordants, the tannins can work to help to make something stable. And on this particular sample, you see the larger leaves are sumac leaves. So that is another one. Maple leaves do really well. I'm trying to think. I know I will forget some, but you can also use, if you're in a different bioregion, there's different other things. Rose leaves are gorgeous. If you have access to any kind of, whether it's a shrub rose or any kind of rose, or you're getting roses from the, florist, somebody has given you roses and you can use the leaves from that. Those are some of my favorites to use. Like I said, maple leaves. Mixed results for me with oak leaves. Wild geranium make really lovely prints. I think people have also used, and I'm not talking about the flower. Flowers tend to fade. I'm talking about specifically about leaves. So at this point, I've kind of given you a base of plants for printing. Now, when we get into dyeing, today we're going to talk about the seasonal dyes. We're kind of in the season of yellow. If you drive down the road, it's the season of yellow. Plants that are easily accessible, and actually yellow is probably one of the easiest, most accessible dyes in nature. The flavonoids is what it's called in science, and believe me, I am just learning the science about some of this stuff, but that's one of the most readily available colors, and it tends to be quite stable. So at this point, ferns are fun to try too. I will invite, if anybody has a question before I segue into doing an actual demo on a piece of cloth for you. Questions?
So just remember, if you have a option to unmute yourself and you can chime in.
No questions. Okay. If you want to write, also if you're uncomfortable just coming in by unmuting, feel free to put a comment in the comments section, and then maybe we can catch that in a bit. So what I'm going to start us out with is I've got these. This is like the smallest scarf that you can get at a place called Dharma Trading, and they're very inexpensive. 100% silk, made in China. It's 8 momi, MM is the designation when you look them up, but it's Habotai, and it really does make a nice print. You can use more expensive. I think again it's important to test things. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to roll a scarf. I tend to roll mine. People do it very differently. You'll see some people use plastic as a barrier. Now, to me, that kind of takes away the concept of being ecological in your practice. So I would never do any kind of plastic barrier. I'm laying my scarf down flat, and I'm going to see if I can tip this.
Perfect.
Can you see the scarf?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So what I've done, I always soak ahead of time. Sometimes people will soak. It's nice to do, like if you have a Formica countertop or something. I've got some really polished board I'm using. But you try to, and I'm real loosey-goosey, but I'm just showing you, if you are a more fastidious person and you want to get as many wrinkles out as you can, you wring this out first, but you want a wet textile, because again, this is anything that we can do to make our print clearer, to make it the contact better. And these tags come off real easy, but I'm not going to bother right now. When I talked about a barrier, I don't have a barrier cloth right now, but I'm just going to pick this scarf up for a second. This, by the way, is dyed with onion skin. It's not particularly successful. They're not all successful, but it was over dyed with onion skin. But it shows you what onion skin looks like. I love the texture, so you may not even want to iron a scarf. But anyway, back to being a barrier cloth. You might take a piece of paper, like butcher paper, now not something with a wax coating. I mean, more like a parchment paper that you could lay over the top here. That would be more ecological. But first, you would put your leaves down. Now, I didn't talk about some of the mordants that are very simple that India Flint uses. This is rusty water. By rusty water, I mean you can take and it makes something called ferrous acetate. If you have old iron soaking in water or an old nail, put it in a jar. Excuse me for a minute. This is a jar of old metal I've had for ages, and I just keep putting water on it so I can make rusty water in that. You can hasten it with vinegar if you want to get it to do it overnight. But as I said, iron actually is a metallic salt, right? A metallic substance. And I mentioned earlier that often it's used as a mordant, but really we're using it to modify, and it's going to make a mark. So I've soaked some leaves in a little bit of iron water. I will caution you, iron water is strong stuff. So you don't take 2 tablespoons out of here, put it in your yogurt cup. You take just a little bit. You don't want to fill the whole thing with straight. It's like a heavy concentrate. You fill this with water, and then you put some in. So I'm going to talk about water just in general with dyeing in a second, but I've pre-soaked these for about 15 or 20 minutes, and some people would soak them overnight. The longer they're in the iron, the darker your marks tend to be, which is why you don't want a full strength. I'm going to show you when I get to the clay one where I did use it full strength and it's not very successful. So I've just, some of us are very fastidious. We're going to spend a lot of time with placement. Can you see that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then I've got one of those Heliopsis leaves here. Still got a big stash of last year's winter leaves. Here's one of the, I'm really lucky because I have some of these mountain ash trees on my land. And that's what I love of kind of the sort of terroir, if you will. What is your bioregion bringing to you? Now, if any of you are from southern Wisconsin, you've got a myriad of things that we can't grow up here. You've got black walnut. I have one friend in Vilas County who's also a natural dyer who may have one of the only trees, black walnut trees in Vilas County. And the leaves make beautiful print, but you can make great dye out of black walnut husks. So I soaked a few of the onion skin here, and I'm just kind of doing a mishmash. So I'm going to move this. What I tend to do, and it's just my habits, you can lay everything out and then cover it with a barrier and roll it. But I tend to like the symmetry of folding my scarf in half and having that image on both sides. One of the reasons people use a barrier cloth too is there's something called ghost printing. And that's where you get like a shadow image, but I kind of like that. And as I said, I'm a real random person. For some people that would drive them insane. But for me, that really works. So I'm taking some of the berries from the sumac. Now, these were collected last winter. And one thing I do want to mention while I'm just laying this out is I like to, particularly when we're foraging, to talk about the honorable harvest. And if you haven't read Robin Wall Kimmerer's wonderful book called Braiding Sweetgrass, I highly recommend it because it talks about ethnobotany. It talks about kind of a land ethic in relationship to the natural world. Generally people who will do foraging won't take more than 10% in an area. But just for me, when I can frame it philosophically in terms of the honorable harvest, it's something that helps to sink in and helps me remember. And a shout out, Sarah said interlibrary loan opens up this week. So if there are books that are on the resource list, or for example, Braiding Sweetgrass, and you'd like to not buy them, you can certainly check them out at the library.
And I went ahead and linked in that resource guide. I linked to the copies of books we are. Anything else we can help you get?
You are so awesome. Thank you. So I could go on and on. As I said, I could layer more on top. I know what I want on here, and I don't think I soaked any. Maybe I did. It's some sumac, because remember I was mentioning how sumac has tannins. It really prints beautifully. Mine might have slid to the bottom. I got it here. I went out and I did a small amount for our demo today. So one thing I wanted to mention is if you can get windfalls, certainly it's better. It's interesting to have the pattern of a critter having eaten through the leaf too. So again, depending on if you're a person who likes randomness or is more precise. I mean, you could layer things. I'll just layer one thing. Okay, so now I'm at the point where I'm going to fold this over because, as I said, I kind of like somewhat of a bit of symmetry. And things are going to shift a bit. You probably notice I have a tremor in my hand, which it's nothing serious, but it sometimes inhibits any effort I might make. It's now become part of my signature in a way. I want to talk about rolling things. You can use a dowel. This is I got it at the hardware store. I use them for teaching, but you could go out if you're out in the woods. You could gather some sticks. Now remember, there's a lot of tannin in the leaves and in the bark of trees. So if I rolled this, the other thing is if I have a snaggy branch, like I have a branch here, I think it's from maybe our plum tree out in the yard, but this is pretty smooth. But if you have, big nodules coming out of the side, you might stress out your cloth, but there would probably be some really interesting color coming from this bark, from the tannins in the bark. People often will roll onto a metal pipe. I don't do that. I've used skinnier dowel rods. I took a class recently using the bigger, and I was like, wow, one of the things that does is it eliminates some wrinkles. Well, you can see it's meant for like a longer, wider scarf. But for example, if I'm laying it down here, you can see where you could do 2 small sample scarves on this one dowel. So now the second part, now that we've laid out, is we're going to roll. Some people will just bundle, as in keep folding, and we'll kind of do that a bit. Of course, you're cutting your dowels so that they match the vessel. You can either steam or simmer. So see, I'm kind of trying to press the wrinkles out as I go along, but I don't mind that texture. I'm kind of a texture freak. I guess that's why I wound up in clay and in paper making, because they're both really lend themselves to a lot of texture. So I'm going to roll as tightly as I can around the dowel. And it's kind of cool the way it looks before you even start to steam it. At this point, it's interesting. So I'm almost rolled. There are some people that will weigh down the end. So if you had a really long piece of textile, you might want to weigh down the end. Again, I think it depends on your personality type. Are you willing to accept the randomness of things, or if you want something that's a little bit more precise? Now, the next step is to bind this. We want to bind it. Again, everything's in the interest of making contact with those leaves and with whatever your substrate is. So I tend to recycle the string. Might actually give me some color, probably not. But if you want, you can use fresh string. I just do a very simple whatever knot at the end. I'm just going to do your basic, easy to unwrap knot, which you could still cut off at the end if you're impatient. What happens is when you're done steaming this, you get so excited and you want to see it. It's hard sometimes to wait. You want to cut it off and so forth. So what I wanted to draw your attention, if any of you have worked with shape resist, whether it's tie-dye, as we know in America, or if you've done work with shibori, which is the resist form from Japan, there is a type called arashi, which is a storm, and it's often done on a pole and wrapped with string. Can you see that? So kind of those lines that I showed you before kind of have that look. So you'll get a little bit of that look. Now, you can decide if you want that even between, fairly even, eyeballed as you're wrapping it. Just make sure that you're wrapping tight. I mean, that you feel some resistance as you're pulling it. And, we don't want to be able to remove or, move that, which is why we want to have a tight knot. And hoping you all can see that.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm not going to quite make it. That's kind of the downside of recycling. So I'm just going to cut off a piece of fresh string and just tie it on there. Now, in times of lockdown, just think of, you probably have sources of string in your house from other projects. And if you don't have silk, for example, in your home and you want to try something, I would suggest trying the paper, or raid your closet, see, if you have anything from circa 1990 that you're willing to sacrifice. So I'm just gonna, because I tend to be loose, I could leave those, or I could cut them a little bit closer. I don't want it to unravel on me. So I've added a little tail, and then you get the drift. I'm gonna wrap it all the way to the end, and then I'll loop around the last loop. And some people will actually use rubber bands at the end just to make sure everything is tight. When I learned about a little bit about shibori, and I had the incredible privilege of going to study indigo in Japan for a short workshop, and a woman from Russia taught me how to do that knot where you're just using one and you're like using your thumb to, I don't even know what it's called, but it really secures a tight knot. So you can see that's ready. Now I'm going to go through the next two, and then I'm going to show you the steamer pot that we use. But quickly, I'm going to get out of the frame for just a minute. And you can either, as I said, simmer or steam. I tend to choose steaming. You could simmer and dye. That's an option. I tend to drift towards printing and then over dyeing. And I'll talk about that a little bit in just a sec, but I'm just going to be right back. I am going to bring this in the frame right now just so I don't forget to talk about it. One of the best tools to get, and I know thrift stores are open, some of them on a minimal basis now, or if you have one and you're lingering in your pantry, in your kitchen cupboards, and you don't use it anymore, any kind of roasting pan. This one I lucked out. It's stainless steel, and I didn't talk about that, but reactivity comes from metals. And stainless steel, anything stainless steel is good to have for natural dyeing. Anything, and if you, second option is a very clean enamel pan, like a canning kettle or something smaller. A small canning kettle is excellent to have to use for natural dyeing. And again, this stuff is very accessible. It's inexpensive, but you can make do if you have old pans at home. And I'll talk a little bit about the reactivity versus non-reactivity, but my point for something like using a roaster like this, I know some people actually use the plug-in roasters. You want to devote whatever your pot is to art. After it's your art practice, you could use it for maybe a couple different types of art projects, but it shouldn't be used to, roast some chicken on Sunday or whatever. So make sure that you dedicate somehow, mark it, leave it not in harm's way of getting used as a kitchen item. You can see the advantage of the length, right? Because I can lay something across the bottom for simmering, like a long dowel. In the case of what we're going to do next, which we're going to use this for, you can stack paper. And that's a set, like, to me, if you have one tool, that would be the tool as far as whether you simmer or steam. I used old vegetable steamers. And again, I'm going to just jump out of the screen real quick. This one has a little rust on it. So remember how I talked about the rust kind of adding something? Sometimes India talks about putting a rusty tool in your water. I'm going to put a rusty steamer in here. I usually wouldn't use my stainless for this, but I don't think it's going to contaminate it. But I like I said, I mostly like to steam instead of immerse. So I will use the steamer, and then it's going to be hard to see. So what will happen is I have old tiles. You could use other things, anything to kind of weigh down and press. The next thing I'm going to demo is getting the paper ready. Looking for my sample here. So I also listed in our sample, the paper is wet ahead of time. Now this is more like a blotter paper, and it was laying around. I like to kind of make it like it might, because I did do a lot of handmade books, and I sometimes still do very small accordion concertina folds. So this was soaked, and you don't want to soak it long, maybe 5 to 10 minutes. But you can see this is more of a blotter style. So I'm going to get prints, but I don't have that nice sharp crease that I would get if I used a good watercolor paper, like a cotton rag watercolor. Or I prefer like a print paper. And I've listed some options in the handout of Arches, Fabriano. I use handmade paper. Again, in these times, if you want to experiment at home, what a lovely opportunity to use whatever paper you're wanting to use something heavier. You're not going to want to use like drawing, or, I shouldn't say drawing paper, but like really lightweight, paper that you would put through your computer or anything like that. I've seen people use old pages of books and done some really cool things with prints, but you've got to be very careful as well. So I've kind of made it this way. One of the other things I learned from someone I took a class from is that you can also put your things, and you're going to see I'm going to get texture here, between some corrugated cardboard. You could find a stiffer cardboard with less corrugation if you wanted, and then wrap your items in there once you've spread out your paper. So in the interest of, Sarah, do you have, I can check on it. Okay, moving right along. It's already 11 o'clock. So I'm just going to quickly throw some things in here just so I can show you how to wrap it. So sometimes people will use an alum, and as I said, I'm not getting into mordants. I like the way the prints look on paper without mordants. So I like that this is already a book form. And so I'm just going to take just some random things I picked out here. And this is, again, what I love about Coreopsis is this sort of feathery texture. And this is a really fun way to see what prints in your yard too. Like just go out, or if you're out hiking, again, keeping in mind all the things we're talking about being conscious of what you're taking, being conscious of your impact on the environment you're in. So I can do it. What's cool is, again, it'll print on both sides, but I might decide that way. And for those of you that draw or do photography, you can have this a base, or you could over dye it. Now this is just straight leaves. Okay, now I'm taking some of the ones that I dipped in iron water. So I again encourage you, if you want to do small samples, and if being precise and being able to repeat your process is important to you, you will get to know what plants do really well in your area. I just gave you kind of my list of what I think works well around here. But like I said, any of you that might be in Madison, or if you're lucky enough to be the only person in Vilas County that has a black walnut, the black walnut leaves well. And anyway, so I'm just going to do that, and I'm going to close it up, and I am going to try it for a little corrugated fun here. I might at this point decide to use rubber bands to kind of help to hold this just for the sake of time, I'm going to wrap this really tight and just off my, oh, maybe I took the wrong end. But this does not, again, have to be precise. This is all about, and you know, you want to be more precise about your edges. It's all about making this contact between the plants and between your substrate. In this case, the wet paper. And again, it doesn't have to be wet that long. 5 to 10 minutes is fine. I have tried what is considered the least toxic of mordants. That's actually you used to be able to find. I don't know if you still can in the grocery store, but alum, pickling alum, is used as a mordant. And it's the least, there's one called potassium aluminum sulfate. That's the most commonly available. And you can get it from dye places, but you can also get it just in little jars at the store. You don't need a lot. You dilute it with water, and then you could soak your paper in it. I'll tell you why I don't like it, is it makes things real super yellow. So everything tends to yellow. So for the sake of being a little quick here, I'm going to go ahead and lay that on a tile. You could just sandwich between tiles, between multiple tiles, sandwich multiple prints in between, so you could stack, and then make sure you've got something heavy on top. Then you would put it in with a couple inches of water in the bottom of your pan. And because we're going to do a ceramic tile, I don't have a lot of unglazed work left, and I didn't get a chance to get, I was going to get some bisque from Johanna, and it just didn't happen. So this has nothing on the surface. I probably should have soaked the bisque a little bit, but instead what I'm going to do, I could have soaked it in water or an alum solution, but I'll just take these off real quick. You can see I like hot press paper. I told you I like texture, but this for me, this is a back of something that I was using as a mold, but I would rather have a smooth texture so I don't have that competition in the back. But this would be soaked, and you could do this with a pot. And I'm going to show you another technique that wasn't originally part of India Flint's repertoire, but which you can try. And it could be used with any of these things. Again, I've got smoke bush, just the old standards here. But just have at it and try everything, because it's just a delight to discover what's in your world. So this is something where we call an iron blanket. See how dark it is? That's what iron does. Iron water will darken. And I soak this in a diluted iron water. You see the old prints? See, it gives prints from other things. You could lay an iron blanket on your cloth. In this instance, I'm going to lay it and wrap it, because I don't have anything really that's going to help me hold this. So if I had a 3D piece of pottery, let's say this is an iron blanket, and this bottle, for the sake of demonstration, is a pot that you made or a sculpture you made. You could take your wetted iron blanket that was maybe soaked for 10 or 15 minutes in your iron water, or longer if you want it darker. And then you could, after you kind of put your leaves, and you kind of have to work around your pot, right? But your leaves are wet, so they should adhere to bisque. And then you'd wrap. So, but going flat, right, is an easy way to start, and maybe just like you would do test tiles for glazes or for surfaces, you might go ahead and wrap that. And again, we would tie that around and make sure you have really good contact. And then you put it in the steamer and be able to steam it. typically we steam things for like 90 minutes, which is why we are not going to get to the end of this. But this afternoon, for anybody that is coming, we can also talk about maybe we could post the pictures in the invite on Facebook, or I can send them to Sarah so you can
Absolutely.
see
We could figure out a way to post the
what our
afters.
samples came out like. So I think we'll do that. And then what I wanted to say is at this point, I'm going to get this on the steamer. Oh, I wanted to talk about ventilation. I've got my doors open. In winter, it's trickier, but it's good to have some kind of ventilation, because even though these are all natural things, there can be allergies, there can be toxicity, and you don't want to subject yourself to those kind of things, particularly if you tend to be sensitive. One of the drawbacks of all my years of clay work and doing it in the 70s, before people were really being careful, we just worried about lead, not dust from ceramics then. So I tend to be pretty compromised with my reaction to the environment. So I try to be in a place where I can either open the door or somehow have some ventilation when I'm doing these practices, which is why this is such a great time of year to do it. So anyway, you get the drift. I am going to take this. I want to talk about ways you could use your kitchen stove, preferable not to. I've got a hot plate here. I have two kinds. What do they call? Oh, induction. This is an induction. Can you see it? Probably not. Can you see it now?
You betcha.
Okay, this is an induction cooktop. I'll tell you, the plus side is it's big if you have big pots. The downside is it can only have stainless steel. So that limits you quite a bit. I would rather get a cheap hot plate if you're starting out. I also have like an outside, like if you have a burner for camping, something like that, you can work outside with that. Since this is stainless steel, I can plug this in and turn it on, and always know that one is at risk of overloading your circuits if you have too many pots going at the same time. So I'm just going to put that on and have a cover somewhere. I think what I might do is just hold off and put it on. Oh, there it is. I think I'm going to put this on during lunch, and then any of you coming back this afternoon for the critique, or we'll have it online for you. But remember, the magic number on this stuff is like 90 minutes, and you don't want it boiling. You're just simmering. Make sure you don't run out of water. So I've got it covered. I've got weight on top of it. I've got my 2 inches of water minimum. Make sure that you turn it down low enough so that I have burned a scarf by going and trying to multitask. So be mindful of that. You don't want to start your projects on fire. You don't want to start your shop on fire. Anyway, that's just one tip for you there. But just to show you one of what I think is like my favorite that I actually did last summer, it's faded some, but you can see my point about how this might be a background if you are a printer, a dyer, a painter of any stripe. My next foray of experimentation is I'm going to be making some inks out of my natural dyes. So I know Norma does a lot of cyanotype photography, and if you do anything like that, you could apply your emulsion on there and then expose more, so you keep building up surface. But you can see how the paper got a little bit embossed, which I just love. And this is a better quality paper. A little of the yellow lingered. So now remember, this is over a year ago. that I did this print. And then this is this really cool plant. I think somebody called it wild basil or something that grows here. It's kind of got a purple flower, and it was growing, randomly in my woods. But isn't that a lovely, for those of you that are watercolors? I mean, what a lovely look. And again, it was stable enough to last a year. Some people use birch leaves. I wanted to bring that up as a wonderful thing. Like I said, you can try fern. Just use this as an opportunity to just connect with this beautiful time of year that we have. And then you could make your own book covers perhaps for this, or a box when you take the class as part of the state. I'm definitely signing up for that if there's any room for it, because I've always wanted to learn to make boxes. So I've done a lot of hack boxes, but you could, easily make this into a container in some way. Or for those of you that are more oriented towards doing work that hangs on the wall, that you could overpaint it, you could scale it up based on your container. And there are a myriad of exciting things that you can do with this botanical printing. I want to, in the course of this, I've got things steaming, and are there any questions right now from people? Comments? Not? Okay. I can move forward to the next step. We are going to, I will show you some books towards the end too, but I want to teach you a little bit about how you could extract the natural color that surrounds us right now. And if there's time, I think I'm going to do a post-printing modification on some of that silk that you saw before. So I want to tell you one of my handy dandy tips. First of all, is it'd be best to use stainless steel for extracting color. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your plant material. I picked 4 local things that all of us have access to in the Northwoods. Well, actually 3, but I prepared them 4 ways, and all during the season, you'll have a different palette. I mean, you have the grocery store palette. We didn't talk about avocado pits and avocado skins. This is an example of the browns. You can even get pinks to browns working with avocado pits and avocado skins on silk. So that gives you an idea of that. I chose not to work with that. I usually have that as one of the options again, things that are, would be discarded that you have access to.
Okay, everybody. So I just got off the phone with Debbie. She's going to be calling in, so we'll at least be able to hear her until her internet kicks back in. So the joy of broadband in the Northwoods. We'll get there.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, everybody. The wonders of technology and broadband service in the Northwoods, I guess, is what we can attribute it to, because I don't know what we've got going here. We've got a couple different ways I've tried to connect, and I haven't been able to use cellular data or Wi-Fi. So we'll go ahead, and I can kind of walk you through the plants. You can take some notes, and apologies to everybody. I maybe will come back in. I just don't know. What I want to do is go back to the plants that you can find along roadsides right now, and that are in abundance. And I mentioned sweet gale. Now you can look that up. It grows along the lakes and swamps, and as I said, it's very fragrant. So you'd use it about 2 to 1. If you cut up your stems, it's going to be different. I do want to give you a general recipe also. You don't want to boil things when you extract dye. You want to bring them to a nice simmer. And you simmer with your materials in a stainless steel pan or in an enamel pan, anything non-reactive, for approximately 1 hour. It's interesting. Onion skins you can do for less time. You can do that in like 15 or 20 minutes. I want to tell you, before I get into the other plants, I wanted to tell you about that. Just as a general rule, if you leave your plant material in, let the dye bath cool overnight if you've got enough time. You're going to allow more of the color to transfer into the water. Then you will use some kind of strainer. You might use a dedicated sieve of some kind. You might use a paint strainer bag from a hardware store. You might use mosquito netting, anything that you can catch all that plant material and then transfer your liquid. I wind up often using canning jars, and I'll explain that a little. Unfortunately, with our technology situation, we cannot do that right now, but I will post some pictures just so you can see. But what I do often is take canning jars with the extracted dye, and again, this is for small samples. I will put it into a canning kettle where I have some kind of either a sill pack on the bottom, something, or even a towel that's folded. And then you make like a water bath around your can. So what's cool about that is you might extract dye over a couple days and then have a dye day. And I would caution to mark things and refrigerate them. Back to your plant material. Don't throw it on the compost pile yet. Often, you can take that plant material and use it again and extract color. One of my first teachers of Japanese papermaking and Japanese style dyeing, we customarily in Japanese tradition extract a second extraction from that dye, meaning you simmer the plants again in fresh water, and then you combine the two. So that's why you can get a lot of color that you may not think that you could get by taking the time to do a second extraction. You may just get a lighter shade, or you dye less material. So I've mentioned sweet kale. Now I'm going to go down to 2 common roadside plants this time of year, one of which is the lovely, we've got all those shades of yellows. And when we're thinking about honorable harvest, this brings up a good time to talk about the idea of the pollinators. So in taking only a small amount, we're going to find that we're leaving plenty for the bees and other pollinating insects. And there's 2 plants, one of which is a native and one of which actually is an invasive. And guess which one you can find more of? Tansy. And I did not know it was invasive until Keita Sheehan told me this last year when I did a large project with some of the tansy. And it makes a beautiful color. You can use the stems, and not the stems, but the leaf material and stems and the button flowers. The beautiful golden alongside of the road that's tansy is the one that has the button top, and it smells heavenly. Again, and just you can understand why the bees flock to it. So you can use both. That's going to affect your color. So what I had done for us is I made two types of extractions. I did one including leaves and including the buttons, and then I did one just with the buttons. So they're going to give you a different color. So we've got 3 so far. We've got Sweet Gale, we've got the tansy with some of the stem and leaf. And our last one is the native, and not to be confused with the plant that gives everybody hay fever. It gets a bad rap. Goldenrod is not the one that gives us hay fever. And my brain is shutting down right now, so I can't remember what the one is. That ragweed, that's it. So you will find goldenrod gives a soft, buttery yellow color. And I usually just use the flower heads on that. And it has an abundance of color in it. So you can easily do 2 extractions. I went to a class with one of my teachers, Donna Calendula, who's a Northwood natural dyer and does just incredible work. And she taught me that, she's the one that taught me about doing 2 extractions. And I took all this goldenrod from a workshop that she did, that I took from her, and I was able to reuse it and get beautiful color. So back to what I said at the very beginning about what fabric will take color without an additional mordant. The fabric that will is silk. So if you're experimenting, try silk, or if you have some plain wool, the caveat with wool is that wool will felt if the water is too hot. So you want to make sure that your water is cool enough if you are trying to do wool. You want it warm. All of these extractions require us to reheat the extraction. We can't use it at room temperature. It's got to have some warmth to it. It doesn't have to boil, but you need some warmth to it. And that is determined, as far as when to take it out, is by looking at the color on the fabric. So you got to figure a wet piece of fabric, as we know, is always going to be darker than it would be otherwise. So anyway, that's my comment about the color extraction. And it's crazy to do a demo when you can't see what's going on.
And I do want to let you know, Debbie, that we are right about at 11:30, but we can go a little bit longer given we had up in the middle. It's really up to the group.
Okay, well, let's see if people have questions. And if anybody's coming back this afternoon, I hope that we don't have this problem. But what I might do is I'm probably going to dye these samples, and then, for those that are there, I'm going to actually be at my laptop, not in my studio, because I'll be showing some images, all the work from the exhibit, but I can also then show what I have. But anyway, I don't know what to do other than what I'm doing here.
Yeah. Well, so does anyone have any questions right now, or do we feel like we could give maybe a few more minutes to Debbie to kind of conclude her amazing audio demo since we lost a little bit in the middle there?
Really, we got to visualize these. Can I tell you what these colors look like? One of them
we had someone chime in and say, "Give her more time, please." So.
Oh, please. Tansy leaves have this sort of golden brown color. It looks like a tea. I'm trying to see if I can join the meeting again, but well, it's worth a try. But it's not. It just keeps circling around. That is just crazy. Okay. So no one has a specific question they might want to ask? If not, I am going to talk a little bit about, so for example, I would, in those small jars, if I'm doing tests, I might have...
Oh, we did get a quick question here, Debbie. Sylvia, who wants to know if there's a leaf that gives a somber blue or indigo type color that you can recommend?
A somber blue, not unless it would be, gosh, you know what you could use that gives it's not really a blue, it's more like a purpley gray color, and that would be Hopi dye sunflowers. You can get their sunflowers that are used for dyeing for the wools that are used to make Hopi rugs. And I actually have them. They're called Hopi black dye sunflowers. So you might grow those in your garden. The other plant that will give you that kind of color, a little bit more fugitive, is something that, again, would be a dye garden plant. And that's hollyhock, a black hollyhock. And again, that's not really a somber blue. If you want blues, then come do indigo dyeing with me at my studio. I grow Japanese indigo, and when you do that on silk, it actually has more aqua colors, but there's ways to work with the fresh silk to get almost like baby blues. You don't get the dark midnight blues unless you actually have an indigo vat. And that's a wonderful experience, but it's not something. There are kits out there to do instant indigo, but to do the plant indigo, there are resources out there to do your own tutorials, or I teach that. I actually have a class on indigo coming up on August 15th here, masked, required, and outside. So there's physical distancing, and it's a maximum of 6 people. So that's a way to learn about indigo and see the plant and, follow the whole cycle, because it's like an amazing cycle of the seasons to work with indigo. But I've kind of
And I'm just going to send the link. I'm going to send the link to Debbie's website where that class information can be found.
Yes, and it's through the Land O'Lakes Art Center, the registration for it. However, it will be here, and as I said, I'm very strict about social distancing and mask wearing, and I did do a class a few weeks ago here with this. We had a very small group, and it was lovely, and everybody felt, like relative as safe as we can guarantee ourselves being in person. And we had fun working with all variety of things about indigo. And if any of you are gardeners or want to think about how we might incorporate a plant that creates blue in our lives, those are really the ones that I know about. And there probably is something else out there, but that was the one thing I did want to talk about too. I talked about these wild extractions of things that are out there, but if any of you do like to garden, I would really encourage you to consider growing plants in a garden or dyeing. What's beautiful about plants, and I didn't even get into talking about, my passion for plants and the world of plants just runs very deep, and what I find is so many plants that have medicinal properties are also plants that give color, which I find absolutely fascinating. So anyway, I have a list on your handout of plants that will give you, that are dye plants that will give color. I think you might have noticed in my little vase of things that I was going to talk about, I had a really bright orange cosmos, and it's called Tango Cosmo. And Tango Cosmos is so cool. The bees are crazy about it. I had hummingbirds out in those flowers, and it's so prolific. Often some of us don't like to deadhead things because we enjoy the beauty so often, but you start seeing the petals are starting to fall off. So I will periodically go out and collect the petals, and it's really cool. It makes a beautiful shade of an orangey golden color. I said there's a lot of that color out there. We also things that you can grow in your garden. Now, this is the case. Sometimes a plant that has medicinal properties and also is good for color, if the medicinal value of that plant exceeds the value of the, what I think the color, like we have a lot of yellows, okay? Calendula, some of you are familiar with, pot marigold or calendula. Well, the thing about that plant is it is so valuable for its medicinal properties that I find myself more inclined to collect it to make a salve out of it. It's a very healing plant for your skin, and I know it has other qualities to it. So I will grow it, but its primary use would be for not for color. I didn't mention the easiest plant in terms of you don't have to start it from seed is just go to any garden center when it's time to get bedding plants and get just your regular marigold plant, French marigolds. Doesn't have to be the big ones. It can be the small French marigolds. It doesn't matter if they're red or they're orange or they're yellow, whatever your preference is, they are still going to give you a shade of golden. One of the plants I love that's very fragrant that I have found, this is going to sound crazy, but I usually buy at garden centers, but I bought them at the hardware store in Eagle River. And it's from one of the kind of what I would call the factory big box plant stores, but it's called Mexican Tarragon. You can buy seeds for it, and it's so fragrant, and you use the leaves and the flowers to make color, and that's another golden. I have used rosemary plants, which pink. Purple basil is beautiful. And again, it's just starting on silk. It's how you get to learn what the palette does, what the colors do. And that's why I love just doing small samples of things. And just that act of discovery, I think, is really amazing. So those are, and I also put down seed source for some of these things. I'm trying again to see if I can get back online. Can you see me?
Yes.
I think you're
You see me.
Oh my God! Yay! Hold on. Okay.
Hi, guys. I'm excited.
Hey, Debbie.
I'm so sorry about that. So I started to talk about these wonderful colors, and this is the Tansy Leaves and flowers, okay? So I haven't heated that up yet. I don't know if we can catch a glimmer in the sunlight here. This is the shade. I picked yesterday, and then I just simmered last night and let sit overnight. This is the straight tansy. See how much more golden it is? So we had more of almost a tea color with the flowers and stems included. So everything kind of needs to be cut small. You're going to get better results that way. This is the sweet gale. So that almost looks like a rich cup of black tea you might have in the morning. Here is this goldenrod. I don't know, whenever I think about goldenrod, I want to read Mary Oliver's poem about goldenrod, which probably a lot of you know. But what I wanted to show you, I don't have a canning kettle right here, but what I have is a fairly good sized stainless steel kettle. And because I took my stainless steel pot here, and I had done my extractions last night, this morning I strained it into the jar, label them, always a good idea, and hope the label doesn't come off while you're heating it up. So you're going to simmer these I should have simmered it in the off chance that we actually got back online, right? So it won't take long for this burner to heat it up. And then at least we could do a couple tries to get some color samples. So I had some swatches. Oh, what I can show. I don't know what our time frame is, but I want to show you at least wet. This is what fresh leaf indigo looks like. So it can be anywhere from this pale blue color to kind of an aqua blue. And that's just using these fresh Japanese indigo leaves. I love using it as an over dye over eco prints. And I've done that. Here's what the Japanese indigo looks like. So it goes kind of, it almost looks like basil plants.
It does.
And there's many varieties. They grow, what's cool about them is you can root them. It's a plant that grows by nodules. And so it's called Persicaria Tinctoria. And you can root the plant and have plants. For example, I harvest it twice a year. And I just took some that I had done a fresh leaf with, and I threw them in water. Anybody could have, like when I taught last, what happened is everybody did one scarf with fresh leaf, and then they had a whole jar of these that they brought home, and then, they could plant it out because you do a cutting twice, once midsummer and then once before the frost. And it's a long story how you use that, but I was hoping we could over dye with it, and it's 11:45, so I kind of think that should sail. But I do want to show you what over dyeing might look like if you tried. I'm just going to cut off the sample. See the lines there? You can see that dark line is from the iron that I used. I had used iron water, and then the wrapping of the threads made those lines. So I'm just tearing off a piece. This is a little bit better quality. This might even be a silk satin. And if you're really, really interested in this, there's so many online tutorials right now and a lot of free stuff that you can learn this craft on your own. I'm just going to dip this in the Sweet Gale and see what I get. But it's really interesting. I don't have time to do the indigo, but to see what that color. Oh, I know what I could do. I have indigo vats. Usually we don't want to use in a vat because for a lot of reasons. I'm just going to turn this so I can wheel the vat up here. I don't know if you can see that. Indigo has a very high pH, meaning it can be harsh on fabrics. That's why traditionally indigo, at least the method that I've learned about, which is mostly thought as in Japan, is harsh on wool and it's harsh on silk because these are more delicate fabrics. But for the sake of us having an experience with indigo, I'm going to dip this in here. Usually I want to wet it out. So I'll quick wet it out. Usually I want to wet it out for like 15 to 30 minutes. I'm squeezing the extra water out. Indigo is an animal unto itself, where all of the dyes that we are just working with will release color. This does not release its color just into water. It's not water soluble. So we have to remove some oxygen molecules. And we have different things that act as antioxidants. So you can approach this cookbook. So if you have a recipe, you don't have to know that. You just know it works. So I'm going to take this, and this is soluble indigo underneath the water. So I'm going to dip this in. The other thing about indigo, you leave it less time than, like, usually, like what I just put in the little jar, the sample jars. It takes probably 20 minutes to grab color. This takes 2. And the way indigo works is you build up color. So you don't want to leave something in here for, overnight and take it out, because something happens where the color rubs off. You know how blue jeans are, how they fade, and how it seems like color rubs off? Well, that's a synthetic indigo. They invented it in the 1800s, but it's identical in terms of its molecular structure to indigo. That's natural indigo like this. But it's just really interesting that it's a pigment. It's considered, and you'll see when you get your handout, I use a term called a substantive dye. So it doesn't usually need to have an iron or anything else. You just dip right in. And cotton and other cellulose fibers are traditional use. So I'm going to guess that was 20 minutes. I'm going to just pick this up, see the color you've got. So you've got a color that's not really the color you're going to get. What's happened is you've got kind of, it can be anywhere from a reddish brown to a golden underneath the water. This almost looks muddy, and that's a whole conversation unto itself. But you could see before your very eyes that color is changing. But what's cool about eco prints with this is if you only do a few dips of color, you still see your plant prints, and they kind of resist the color. So what I'm going to do is, usually I would do multiple dips if I was trying to build up surface. But what I'm going to do is just dip this in fresh water. You're rinsing off all the stuff. See that only so much of the indigo is going to stick, okay? And because once it hits the oxygen again, no oxygen, like that. Now it hit oxygen, and look at, it's changed color, and it's now not soluble again. And that means when it's not soluble, it's not going to stick to or it is going to stick to the textile. I don't have to worry that that color is going to come off. So you can see that your prints show up. Since I didn't stick my hand in that edge didn't go in, but it's really cool. And so many different colors you can over dye it. I have a passion for blue. That's what's in my shop. And like I said, I'm doing these samples in here for us. Are there other questions right now? As we are, I've got everything heated up. The one thing about these induction cooktops is they heat up super, super fast. And that's an advantage. And they're big enough that they can handle. I want to say, if it seems like a lot of equipment, I remember this is like a dedicated practice for me. You can be as simple as you want to start out with. And one of probably my first teacher, even before India Flint, is a friend of mine who traveled in Australia. And she would do, like we would call it bush camp, but we really just had old cook stoves. The bush is what camping is in down under in Australia, but we would take cook stoves. She was an Australian, she just traveled there. We had our camp stoves, and we would just gather plants and have little bits of silk. And she actually would go out and camp that way and have her little tiny kit that she brought with her. So if you're fond of going out into the bush of the Northwoods or wherever you live, it's really kind of a beautiful way to think about it, and you're doing practices that are not going to be harmful to the environment. I didn't talk about water a lot. Last summer, I did a residency at Trout Lake with a friend, Mary Burns, who's an incredible, remarkable artist, weaver, and we studied the effect of water on dyes, natural dyes. that was our thing to do with that's the UW's limnology station up at Trout Lake. And we had scientists helping us understand and giving us data. And we checked how the different mineral content of the lakes affected the dyes. And it was fascinating. Some dyes are not super sensitive to the difference in the pH or like if there's a lot of, we don't have a lot of lakes up here, for example, that have a lot of limestone. You go to Lake Monona, Lake Mendota, huge difference. We included that because it's one of the studied lakes of the consortium of lakes that they studied. And so that was drastically different from like the bodies of water up here, but we did notice subtle differences. So remember that water is going to affect. Don't use it if you can avoid fluoridated water. If you are someone who gardens or collects rainwater just for an ecological reason for your whole place that you live, rainwater is the way that traditionally people were used for dyeing. And one of the interesting facts I just learned about indigo, because it likes an alkaline atmosphere, which is more like the water, the hard water, like or for example, is a lot of the places where they would make indigo pigment were in places where there was a lot of limestone. And so it's interesting, without getting over your head, any of our heads, because I'm way over my head on all that science part, that water has an impact. So think about not using chlorinated if you want to be really neutral, because we use neutral water for our testing, but distilled, if you're concerned, for example, that your water is the kind that, your hair turns orange when it comes out of the tap, and you wash it for months at a time, maybe that could be your own personal stamp on your dye colors. It also might be that you want to try a neutral and get distilled water. I'm always about making it the most accessible, making it the least expensive, so that you can experience all these wonderful things without having a huge amount of money or having to get a lot of tools. I'm going to do a quick, usually I have a bunch of dowels or chopsticks. So, is that, I don't think that's me.
I just muted any other phone that might have been.
Okay.
We're good.
So we're not getting a lot of color yet on our silk. It's just not been a long enough time. And I did make sure to weigh, and I have way more more plant material that I use to extract the dye. But I'm glad I saved it all, because I may do a second extraction. So this is what Sweetgale looks like. So maybe not so interesting, but if I left it in longer, remember I over dyed this. So this is on iron, and so I've got a little iron water. You can see the over dye though, how you could have some very subtle colors. I find rosemary over dyed, rosemary plants, cut up stem, and the rosemary leaves make a beautiful over dye for your botanical contact prints. And our others just are not, we don't have them in long enough to really be developing color to really see a lot of difference. So it's so subtle. That's why it's good to at least leave things in, unless you've got, let's just did it 1. You can go up to like a 4-to-1 on fresh of anything. And that can really kick up how quickly you've got color and how quickly it grabs the textile. Here's that beautiful cosmos I talked about. I think it's called Tango, but it's from a small company called Grand Prismatic Seeds, and it's on your list. They have the people that run it, they have a multiple of what they consider their tried and true plants for dyeing. So they do a lot of work with wool. So
We just have one more. We had one more question just come in,
Yes.
asking a comment on freezing plant matter for use in the winter.
Yes, you may do that. I have done that. Make sure your freezer stays working. It can be a disaster. If it's, yes, done it many times. You can even do that with your leaves for eco-printing. If you have a lot of freezer space, I know people that'll, like put their stuff between, wax paper, make them flat, put them in a big flat bag, and lay them on a tray, like a cookie sheet tray in the freezer, and then take things out that way. I just find for me, drying works really well. I have a whole wall that you can't see of jars of stuff that I've dried, and I just dry things like I had one of my teachers who I want to put a shout out to. She's got an amazing blog, and this is a little bit more advanced book, but if you're kind of a science nerd and want to learn about natural dyes, Joy Boutrup and Catherine Ellis is my teacher, and I consider her a friend. She's an amazing woman. She did this book, and where was I going with that? Oh, she just did on live a Zoom thing. And she uses, if you've ever seen these bags for drying plants, they are like mesh bags and they have shelves in them, so it keeps insects out. But I just use plain old window screens, and I keep it in actually my studio. I have a shelf kind of high up here, and so I've got a lot of south-facing sun, so stuff dries pretty quickly. You could just use any kind of screening to dry plants if that's preferable. I know with humid conditions that can be a challenge, but freezing is definitely enough. I can't speak with authority on every plant. I mean, it might affect your color on some plants. For example, with indigo, I learned I was trying to freeze fresh leaf indigo, and you lose this enzyme that's available only when it's freshly picked, because it goes through a transformation after that, and then you lose access to that blue color. So I hope that was helpful. Freezing is definitely a great option if you don't have time now and the plants are there. Gather them up. You can do them ahead of time if that makes it easier for you. Stick them in some bags or however you want to store them in your freezer. And then, it's a great activity, maybe at a less busy time for you. And also, too, just like we want to preserve the summer bounty through different food preservation techniques, that's possible. I've also refrigerated jars of my dyes after I've extracted them. If I'm not going to use them right away, I've also been sloppy and just skim stuff off. That would not be a practice I would encourage. That's just me being a slob. But it is an option if you want to, have it. There is even solar dyeing, which is so cool with the salt, where you might take a nice quart jar. If you have a really sunny window, you fill it with your plant matter and just the plant matter and water and your textile, something silk or whatever. Silk work is great. And then just sit it out in the window and unopened, periodically give it a stir. But just think about that solar dyeing. That's a really cool activity. What I love about these things is it's a great way to teach your kids, your grandkids. If you're an educator, if you're an environmental educator, it's a great way to teach about the natural world and science and, the kind of STEAM thing that artists like. We don't just like STEM. We want STEAM. So those are options for you as well. Actually, the seed library has calendula seeds. Does it not? At the library?
We're out for this season, but we have in the past. I'd love to build our seed. We have to have some more dye.
And you know, I can probably
Dye
bring up
seeds.
some calendula seeds because they're so prolific that what'll happen is you will have once you've established them in a sunny spot, they'll just reseed themselves. So I can probably bring a bunch of seeds for the library to just get things going again.
Fabulous.
That particular plant. This company that I'm recommending to you is called open pollinated. So there's not hybrids where you don't, the next generation seed. Like if you save seeds, for example, from these cosmos, I did that and I have so many friends now that grew this cosmos out because I gave it to a friend and she gave the seeds away. So you can collect seeds from many things that are open pollinated. It's just that if you've got a plant that's not open pollinated, that hybrid, it won't come back the same next year. So, other questions? Anybody else? I'm still looking at our plants here, and I'm just going to let them sit. That's the other thing I wanted to tell you. If you dye fabric and you're not happy with your fabric by the end of the day, you can let it sit in the dye overnight and let it get darker. And I'll probably do that with these. I'm frankly surprised they're not striking as quick. And that makes me think maybe I should have done more than 2-to-1 with them. So it makes you realize if you do a large project, you need a lot of plants. So that's why some plants are easier to collect than others, like tansy. Just do it properly so you're not spreading an invasive. I wouldn't want Keita to get mad at me for encouraging that. But if you collect the seed heads and or the plant and you put it just properly after you're done extracting color from it, I would think it's going to be spent afterwards anyway, but if there's any concern at all, you want to dispose of it, not on your compost pile. So those are just some concerns when we're growing things in our gardens or gathering things in the wild, that whether they're protected, whether they might be invasive.
Wonderful. We're just a few minutes past noon.
Oh, okay.
So I think this is probably a good time to wrap things up. And thank you, Debbie, so much for
You're very welcome.
expertise and experience and experimentation, but also your patience with the technology.
And I feel really bad about that for everybody. I'm so sorry.
Well, it's not your fault.
What I will do is, under the original invitation, does that make sense?
We can find
put images there.
if you send some images to me, I can post them to a number of places and make sure that they're available for people going forward. And I'll also just remind folks that handout that I put in the chat at the beginning of the presentation has Debbie's contact information. So if there are any questions after you kind of percolate on it for a little while, I know that she's very generous with her knowledge.
I'm happy to be a resource for anybody that wants to dive into this stuff. And I'm pretty much in non-essential worker, everything canceled. That workshop, so I am available to consult with you and help in any way I can. So it might be kind of fun to think about, if we replenish the seed library, getting a few of these varieties so that people might want to consider, I know they're not edibles, but if people want to consider color and bringing pollinators into their gardens in the future, it would be really fun to have some of these.
Fabulous.
Mullein, by the way, a middle plant will give color.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I just want to also mention, if any of you are interested in, if you're participants in the local art show, the local rap show, and are planning to join us back at 1 o'clock after you've had some time to stretch your arms and legs and maybe get some lunch, to join us, you are just going to use the exact same link to get back into this kind of, I probably could turn my camera on. to get back into this virtual
There
room.
she is.
So it's hello. It's exactly the same process, and we'll continue at 1 o'clock. So thank you, everybody, so much.
Yeah, I just want to mention
Thank
one
you, Lynn.
thing. Yeah, thank you so much. Just one thing can I mention before we go?
Of course.
Okay, for this afternoon, for those of you who are interested in coming back, my plan is to kind of go through the winning entries, but then as you ask me, if you want me to talk specifically about your work, please chime in, let me know, and I'll probably comment about, a few of the other pieces in the exhibit besides the winning entries, but just to make sure if that's important to you, to make sure to let us know. And I look forward to seeing everybody after lunch. Thanks for being here.